Hey, and welcome to the Leading with Nice interview series podcast. My name is Matthew Ewell, and we want to help you inspire others, build loyalty, and get results. Now, today's guest, when I was doing research and looking for potential people to be on the podcast, I came across Adam Kingl's new book, and I was like, "Really? Is this true?" And we're going to talk about it in a bit, and you're going to see why I was so dumbfounded at like how perfect the topic was for the time we're in right now. And when I started to learn more about Adam, I was like, oh, I totally get it. Adam has a full career of working in innovation, strategy, culture, leadership. He really is somebody that when you want to talk about the future of work, the future of leadership, how culture might look into the 2020s and beyond, he's the guy you want to have in the conversation. No, I don't want to spend a lot of time going over his resume and all his accomplishments, because that will come out through our conversation. And really, I want to maximize the time we get to his good thinking. And as you know, if you're a frequent listener of the Leading with Nice interview series podcast, we share questions in advance. And these are actually some of the most exciting. Like, I'm most excited for these questions. Naomi, who works with me here, again, if you listen, she helps. We do the research together. She was a career journalist before joining our company. And we spent a lot of time really forming these questions so that we could maximize Adam's knowledge and get the most out of these. So we'll jump right to it. So Adam, good day. Thank you for joining us here.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So also, I think it's important to note for our listeners here in Canada, we had a quick conversation before. Tell us where you are right now.
All right, I'm joining you from Richmond in Surrey, in the United Kingdom, which is just southwest of Greater London.
Right. So when I was sharing with Adam before we got on, I was confused because if you're we're in Toronto, Canada, and I know a lot of our listeners are here in Canada as well. And so for probably the first half of us doing prep work, I thought he was in British Columbia because Richmond and Surrey. And so when we were recording this at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and so when I saw the time, I was like, man, Adam's a go-getter. He's getting up at 7 a.m. for this podcast. Little did I know, it's actually 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock where he is, so it's not as nearly as impressive, but still I appreciate it. You're still tops in my books. So right off the bat, I want to talk, you have a new book coming out, and it's titled Next Generation Leadership. Oh, sorry, it's just come out. Sorry, it's not coming out. It's right. Just come out. And we can't go any further without asking, when you were writing this Next Generation Leadership and researching it, pandemic COVID-19 wasn't even being talked about. You've probably been working on this for a long time. So now, taking all the research you did and all the work you've done, the cumulative studies you have on your belt, and what we've experienced the past 2 years, what's changed? What's different? What's the same?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're completely right. The timeliness of the book is, I have to admit, somewhat down to chance, because, of course, I started researching the book over 10 years ago. So,
right, yes,
COVID wasn't in our nomenclature, and
yes.
But yes, certainly it seems that several of the trends that I had forecast were accelerated by COVID. So here's what's changed. Virtual work is here to stay. No doubt about it. They, for example, here in the city of London, several financial institutions have announced that they are shedding commercial real estate because they're going to make working from home, or the option of working from home, a permanent basis. I was trying to research all the major companies that have made the option of working from home permanently a regular thing now, and it's the list goes on and on and on, and it isn't necessarily companies you would expect. You might think, oh sure, Dropbox, oh sure, Google, oh sure, but Capital One, Hitachi, Fujitsu, Siemens. These are my favorites. The state of Massachusetts.
That's amazing.
Even better. 50% of the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy and the Pentagon are now going to be able to work from home on an ongoing basis.
That's amazing. I just love the idea that to get my driver's license renewed in Massachusetts, I'm going to Betty's house.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, that's right.
not how I know that's not how it's going to work, but
She
it's
makes
that
a
idea.
mean cup of herbal tea. You do a couple laps around the block in her Ford Pinto, and you're set.
Right. Amazing.
So clearly, virtual work is here to stay. Now, a few companies are taking the opposite bet. They are saying, like Goldman Sachs, right? They're saying, get back
Yes.
into the office right now. This is how creativity and collaboration happens. So companies are making big bets, and we will see who's going to be right. I suspect, however, that the companies that will be competitive, at least from the perspective of talent, recruitment, and retention, will be those who are leaning
Mhm.
into virtual work, at least making it
Yes.
a partial or full option.
I totally agree. There is something that came out of the UK. I did a blog post or something. I feel like 2 years ago now, insurance companies in the UK had stopped asking for educational requirements for entry level jobs,
Yeah.
and which of course just opened up. And I think this is in the same bucket of that, like in terms of attractiveness of a place to work.
Yeah. Oh, completely. Yeah, completely. It's interesting. That pointer on education requirements is interesting. This is sort of a situation of what goes around comes around, because here again, the City of London, and particularly the financial institutions, for many years, decades, were known for having a rich, diverse mix of employees, which they would say was at least partially attributable to their success. So you had
Mhm.
your Oxbridge graduates, and you had people who came in as school leavers doing an apprenticeship, many from local East London neighborhoods, so-called Barrow Boys back in the day,
Yeah.
and that rich combination. Many banks said this is why we have been successful. So very interesting that that the insurance companies are coming back around to the idea of being more liberal around requirements. So certainly, I think virtual work is key.
Mm.
I'll give you another reason why, and this
Yeah.
came out in my book. I asked Generation Y,
Yeah.
millennials, what are the top criteria for you in selecting an employer and why you might stay with an employer? The number one answer was work-life balance. Number one,
Mm.
not salary, not pension, not promotability opportunities. Work-life balance. And we know that we are facing a loyalty crisis in the workforce. Gen Y currently
Mm.
composes 50% of the global workforce.
Mhm.
It's going to be 75% in 4 short years. It's already well over 50% in many parts of the world. I'm thinking of Africa, for example, in particular.
Mhm.
And you have a generation that expects that they're not going to stay for any given employer for, on average, more than 3 to 5 years. And over a third are suspecting no more than 2 years. So you have this massive portion of the workforce
Mm.
that are saying every 2 to 5 years, I'm moving on unless you're doing something for me.
I
And if
love the loyalty crisis. Sorry, I can't get a loyalty crisis. I I wonder, and this is I wonder if we talk in 3 to 5 years again,
mm,
if loyalty crisis has become not we don't attach the word crisis at the end.
mm,
It's the loyalty solution or something we're talking about. Like we figured out how to either train and move people in and out of our companies more fluidly, or
right.
we figured out a way to like help make them want to stay, had better development.
Yeah, I hope so. Certainly, I hope for the latter, and I think the former is an inevitability.
Mm,
Many,
mm,
because we know that over 70% of the world's work occurs in projects. That implies that you need a more flexible workforce on a project, working on a project by
mm.
project basis. The gig economy certainly encompasses a lot more than Uber drivers
Yes,
and
yes,
delivery
100%.
people. So, I know many people, and I'm one of them,
Yeah,
embraces that lifestyle.
yes,
But employers have to catch up with this trend.
yes.
The employees, or more accurately, the workforce, are ahead of most HR departments in this manner.
I was
Um,
just before we got on. I was a former colleague that I hired. Oh, me, I guess like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and we both moved on from that organization. Obviously,
mm,
um, she was telling me how she's just left. She had two gigs, and they like she's been at them for 2 years, and she just left one, and that the person, her boss at the one gig, was surprised, and she was like, "Oh, why are you surprised? Like the project you hired me." we finished it and now we're maintaining. So now you need somebody different to like, I'm not a maintainer. And
Right.
he was like blown away, just like everything he could. She's like, I don't want this. Like, I don't want to sit and maintain this thing.
Right.
Like, what do you not get? And he was just like, he out in left field. He couldn't comprehend it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing that so much where HR directors in general are just saying, "Help me understand the workforce, particularly the
Yes.
slightly younger workforce." Like the most common refrain, or perhaps complaint is the better word, is that they tell me, "I just don't get them."
Yes.
Could you please help us be the millennial whisperer for us and tell us what they
Millennial was,
want?
that's amazing. I was taught, we had another gentleman on the podcast. He's actually on the West Coast of California. He deals with, he actually calls himself the undercover millennial. Clint Pulvener is his name. And he does a thing where you can hire him to go into your company, and he like basically is undercover as a millennial, and he talks to millennials to find out what they don't like about your company.
Right.
And you and I are probably, I'm 44, we're probably in the same
We
age
are.
range. I remember like companies, if they wanted to make, you talked about work-life balance, which I want to maybe ask you a bit more
Yeah.
about, because companies, when we were, middle management and growing into our full selves, they would like install a foosball table or
Yeah.
a pool table in the break room
And
to
that was
like,
enough.
or like a beer fridge. Cause like, on Fridays when we're working till 7 p.m., we could have a beer at 7. And
Right.
you're like, and we were thought that was great. And now could you imagine?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
we said like, oh, come in on the weekend, we have a pool table and a beer fridge, they'd be like, I also have a pool table and beer fridge. I'll stay at home. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And
But
but
yes,
and the real tragedy is companies are still telling me that same thing. So so I ask them when they bring me in to consult. I say, how tell me how you're attracting and keeping your millennials. And some of them say, well, Adam, we have a foosball table in the kitchen. Full
right.
stop. Like,
Full stop. Exactly. We have foosball table and all seasons of Seinfeld on DVD.
yeah,
Whenever,
that's right.
like, they
While you're eating
have
lunch. Right.
so, I have a few. I listen. This is where I'm gonna divert from a few of our questions because I want to dive deeper. So, when we talk about work life balance today,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Because I think everybody listening right now, everybody has just in their head defined what work life balance is for them individually.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking to an organization, what types of things do they need to be conscious of when looking at this work life balance?
I'm so pleased you asked me that question because I would say the number one revelation for me personally in doing the
Hmm.
research is what I discovered is that there is semantic discord in the global workforce around the term work life balance. Right? So when I
Right.
say semantic discord, I mean people have different definitions of the phrase, and that's why it's a charged term. People get frustrated and angry because they're talking at cross purposes. And particularly I see this difference in the definition between generations. There are probably other ways you could cut it, but I certainly see it between generations. So typically, and I'm generalizing. Whenever you talk about generations, you have to
Yeah. Yeah.
generalize. So forgive me, but typically, baby boomers and Gen X's, when they talk about work life balance, they think of that as a when statement. So, in other words, if an employee comes to me and says, I want work life balance, I think of that as, well, you want to work fewer hours. That's why I mean it's a when question. You want to work fewer hours. When I was your age, I paid my dues. I worked as long as was required. You don't want to work the same number of hours. You're lazy. This generation are so lazy, blah, 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 blah. And so it goes, right? And that is at least partially contributed to this to this misnomer that millennials or Generation Y are a lazy generation. I found that to be far from the truth. So, but when Gen Y when I asked them, what do you mean when you say work life balance? What became clear is that was a where statement.
Mm,
Right? So, in other words, technology allows us to work anywhere, anytime. So, what they're
mm,
rejecting is FaceTime culture. This idea I have to be changed to my desk from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and don't leave until the boss leaves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're even rejecting the generic work week. Right? So they're saying, look, if
yes.
I belong, for example, to a softball league, and that is on Wednesday afternoons, I'm going to do that. That doesn't mean I'm not going to make it up on Saturday, Sunday, etc.
Mm,
Because the internet, for lack of a better term, has made us connected all the time. So the fact that we're working from home does not mean we're working less. In fact, all of us who have been working from home for the last umpteen months know, if anything, we've probably been working more, because where is the switch
Yes.
off? Where is the commute home that tells you it's time to stop work? So
Yes.
this where versus when has illustrated for me that work life balance is a highly charged term. And so, if only people would chat more about what they mean when they talk about that in their context, I think they would get a lot farther. When I used to share this back in the day, when we used to speak at conferences in front of real live people, I'd always
Yeah.
see, particularly when colleagues would sit next to each other who were in different generations, right at this point they would start elbowing each other in the ribs, and I knew at that moment, okay, clearly I have hit a nerve.
Yes.
I'm hitting on something you have discussed or noticed before. So that was quite interesting.
One of the things that kind of pushed me away from full-time work is I worked for a guy who, on day 3 of, he had come in as my senior. I reported to him, and the office hours were like 9 to 5, and my team typically would come in between 10 and noon and work till 6 or whatever. And he was saying to me on day 3, he's like, what is up with you and your team? Why do you work this way? And I said, well, you know, um, I don't know. We come in at 9 and like nobody talks to us till noon anyway. So like, why are we here? And then also like we're working on this web project and the developer is in India. So like I'm on Slack and Discord chats with him at 11 p.m. So I
Yeah.
don't know, like I'm tired at 9 a.m. And he was like, "What's Slack?" And I was like, "Okay, now I know." I You answered all my questions, but it was a real problem for him.
Yeah.
That it was this real parent because he had just worked, and I get it. Like my our parents, like this would have been this would have been unconscionable
Oh, anathema.
that they
Yeah.
would, and for good reasons. Like back then you couldn't get a hold of somebody, they couldn't work on their projects. I remember 10 years ago, so we're talking 2010, 2013 maybe. I was at another organization, and I was working on some writing, and my communications coordinator was leaving the company to go travel through Europe. And I said, her name was Marissa. Her name still is Marissa. I said, Marissa, I said, hey, listen, what would you think? Like, I know you'll be traveling. What would you think if I gave you some of these blog posts or some of these writings I'm doing? You're a great copy editor. What if, I gave them to you while you were over there? And she was like, really? You would do that? And I'm like, oh, I said, I totally did not expect that. I thought you would be like, I'm going to be on vacation.
Hmm.
She's like, Matthew, it is my dream to sit in a Paris cafe and edit copy. Like that would be a dream come true. And sure enough, she did it. And I would get stuff sent to me at like local time 2 a.m. But she would send me a picture from her like Razor flip phone, a smart camera of like a sunset in Paris, and she's like, oh, just finished your blog post on gratitude. And I'd be like, man, you are actually living the life.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I want that.
A
So
modern day technology enabled Gertrude Stein.
right, exactly. It's so great. I want to move on. We could talk about this. Could be work life balance. Could be the whole your next book, work life balance. Just focus on that. We'll do that. So you are having like for anybody. So you've probably already paused this by now and Googled Adam. And if you haven't, pause, Google him, because you need to fully appreciate why I'm asking this next question. When I was doing research and preparing for this, I was like, oh man, this guy's legit. Like, there's a lot of experts out there that have really valid experience that make great guys.
Yeah.
What I really appreciate about you is you have a ton of like in the trenches business work, and you also come at it from a research education viewpoint as well. So I'm going to ask you this question, and for those of you listening at home, listen up, because Adam's going to deliver some great stuff here. You are talking to business leaders right now. So I would love for you to kind of give to us what you're hearing from them about where they're struggling and succeeding, and maybe pair it with like a little bit of academia, like what so what I'm asking is like, what theory do we talk about in school that you're actually seeing lived out and you're hearing both success and struggles they're having from business leaders you're speaking to today?
Yeah, no, thank you. I love that question. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to take a shot at this one. Well, look, the number one issue, or shall I say complaint, that I hear from CEOs today, and again, I think COVID has only accelerated this trend.
Mm,
Is our organization isn't nearly as innovative, adaptable, and inspirational as it needs to be,
mm,
and and so we are struggling. And COVID only illustrated further how far the gap is. And it isn't just that they're telling me that; I also can quantify the gap because BCG put out a survey of CEOs a few years ago, and they asked them, "Is innovation a top three priority for you?" CEOs all over the world, and 95% said yes. Innovation is a top three priority for us. Then, separately, McKinsey asked employees all over the world,
mm,
"How good is your organization at innovation and adaptability?" And 95% answered one degree or other, said basically we're crap at it.
mm.
So it's the exact inverse of the CEO saying something is a priority and employees saying we are poor at it. I don't believe there is a bigger gap in the workforce today between the aspiration and the reality of any other condition of work life. And the reason for that, I think, has to do with the fact that we are still adhering loyally to management processes and philosophies of 160 years ago.
Mm,
We are still, consciously or unconsciously, managing our organization according to the precepts of Frederick Winslow Taylor, who was the father of scientific management in the Industrial Revolution.
mhm,
Right? This is the guy who said every employee is an asset, is a cog in the organizational machine, which was admittedly perfect for the industrial age, right? If I'm working in the Ford, automobile plant, I need to put this screw in this hole in precisely the same way at precisely the same time every single time. And if I can do it even more efficiently or faster and without error, so much the better.
mhm.
And that's all I need to do, right? Don't think. Henry Ford even once said famously, "Why is it every time I hire a pair of hands, a brain comes attached?" That sums up scientific management for you. I'm exaggerating, but you get the
Well,
point.
are you? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Go on.
And the funny thing is, I think many people have assumed that because we've gone through the digital revolution, that our management philosophy and processes have changed, but broadly they have not. Even worse, it is becoming a handicap on human wealth and productivity. So I used to be an associate at the Management Lab, which is Gary Hamel's research association at London Business School, and the research the Management Lab showed that probably all of the productivity growth from the internet and the digital revolution already has happened. And of course, if you look at most countries, GDP growth has declined over the last 15 or more years. So, more digitalization is not going to produce more wealth per se. It creates more efficiency. So it's actually enabling and manifesting some of the goals of the Industrial Revolution even more finely. But the problem is, with every passing year, because we're lazy about adapting our management to be fit for purpose, our organizations are becoming less human. So if I go back to the very first point that I made, my first claim that organizations aren't nearly as innovative or adaptable or as inspirational as they need to be, those three traits are all human traits. They cannot be replaced by AI or any digital initiative that you throw at me. Um, but our organizations are still very much bureaucratic ones. And in fact, the bureaucratic machine is only growing. In the US, and I believe the statistics are very similar in Canada,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
percent of employees who are devoted to bureaucracy. So, what do I mean by that? These are back office support, compliance, internal and external, right? Not customer facing, not product creation or improvement, is reaching 50% of the workforce.
Mm,
I will never believe, and you will never be able to convince me that we need 50% of the workforce spending all day, every day, responding to requests of compliance. Um, And I can't believe that we need as many managers as we do. One of the reasons we have so many managers per employee in our organizations is our philosophy of management is still that management equals to control. In
Mm,
fact, if you look in almost any thesaurus in any language in the world, and you look up the verb to manage, the number one synonym you will see is to control. That's
mm,
often the very first if or the second answer. And so if we think to manage is to control, of course, we actually need lots of managers because work is becoming more complex. So we need more people to supervise it. We need to
mm,
control it. But of course, the more you build in control, the more you also control out innovation, adaptability, and
mm,
inspiration, which is the hurdle that humanity faces to reach the next dramatic acceleration of not just wealth, but of happiness. Um, but at the moment, we still run our organizations as if they are 18th century military campaigns.
mm. I like, I when you said 160, we were still managing like it's 160 years ago, or still, I forget the exact quote, but you said 160 years ago. I said in my head, I'm like, oh, I wonder if he actually means that number. And you did. You're
Yeah, I do.
literally talking
That's
about,
when Frederick Winslow Taylor was writing. Yes.
yeah, that
Yeah.
is, man. Okay. Yeah, I want to go down that road now, but I'm not going to. And we have two more. Now we have two more podcasts we can talk about.
I'll be
The
happy to.
one of the ways. I mean, this is my solution to the management. I hesitate to use the word problem. The management reality today is I've
Mm.
started using the term accountabilities with managers. So, like, what you're accountable for is this. And that gives you flexibility and freedom to do things how you feel will extract what you're accountable for. Um, and so I feel it gives a bit more flexibility, but I have a lot of learning to do. Now, before you wrap up, I have a question I want to ask you about where your inspiration comes from. But before I ask that, I love to leave people with, so here's what I'm thinking will want these tips. These are people that are in a role uh, where they are responsible for other people. So they could be any age, right?
Hmm.
They could be like
Yeah.
20 through 60. So those people, I want to speak also maybe of parents of like teenagers through early and late 20s. So this is who you're speaking to in this. And I
Okay.
want you to give like three things they can do right now to like up their game to be better at helping this next generation become leaders? Like where could maybe like you might have tips as like here's an action you can take right now, here's a blog you can start reading, whatever. I'm sure you have 50 of these, but just give me three actionable steps they can take.
Sure. Okay. So assuming I'm speaking to let's start with people who are looking after others. So if you are a line manager, regardless of your age,
Yeah.
um, purpose is an incredibly important lever that you have at your disposal. Helping your people understand why they do what they do and why they choose to do it here. Unless you can help people answer both of those questions, you are probably contributing to the loyalty crisis.
Mm,
Um, and if you can help people create a golden thread between their purpose and the organization's purpose, so much the better, right? Because then I can go to work every day saying, oh, so if I do these things that fulfill me, I help the organization fulfill its purpose. And when the organization is fulfilling its purpose, they help me fulfill mine. So you get this virtuous circle. Purpose, unfortunately, is still very much relegated in too many organizations to, words in the annual financial report or the
mm,
values that you see in the lift when you walk into the office. Instead of it's actually dialogue. And
mm,
particularly people who are in a mentor position or a line manager position, I think are responsible for helping people to articulate and live their purpose. Because this brings me to the second tip. If you understand what your purpose is, that immediately implies certain development possibilities for you, which are beyond taking a class, though that could be one of them. But often organizations eschew development because they think it's expensive. But often development could be, well, if you want to pursue your career in this direction, you can be shadowing this person. We can put you on an international secondment over there. You can do a project that touches so many of those bases. Unfortunately, still, many organizations think of development as a reward for tenure, i.e., if you work here
Mm.
for 8+ years, then we'll send you on this leadership program at such and such a school. And look, I have made a large portion of my career teaching such courses, but that isn't the only answer. It's not the
Yeah.
only answer.
Yeah.
Development should be all the time and should be directly linked to how people are articulating their purpose. The third thing, and this has nothing to do with line management, is that is we have to speak more openly and empathetically about mental health. Of course, COVID
Mm.
has thrown all of this right up in the air and revealed this to organizations. But until 16 months ago, when many organizations talked about health and wellness, what they really meant was you can't carry a mug of water when you're walking down the stairs, right? It was just about safety, workplace safety, rather than genuine awareness, responses to,
Mm.
and protection of their people around their mental health.
Mm.
And of course, COVID has made those issues more transparent and more acute. And organizations, I think, are starting to respond, but even some are still very slow at that.
Mm.
But like so many of these issues, similar to those of mental health, don't wait until it's a crisis. Be proactive and think about how
Mm.
you are fostering good mental wellness in your organization before someone comes to you, in
Yeah.
the midst of a
Yeah.
crisis.
I find on that topic, especially sometimes if you're in a leadership position where you have the authority or the ability to make decisions around, just for lack of a better description, like time off or flexibility. Sometimes you need to be what's what I'm looking for, um, speculative in giving your employees the space, not because you
Hmm.
think, oh, they're in crisis right now, but just you're like, I'm going to do this so that in the 15% chance that this path might lead to a bad mental health, I'm going to try to head that off right
Yeah.
now. And that can be very counterintuitive. I was speaking to a leader recently that gave they gave their employee a week off. Gave one of their employees a week off just for mental health. And the reason I was speaking to them is that employee emailed me and said, "Hey, I got this week off, but the leader is still emailing me. This is not helpful."
No.
Uh, and their heart was in the right place,
Yeah.
but they just didn't know how to hold. There's a great book called the Equitable Mind, and they talk about like giving somebody a week off, but then also being like, wait, this is not needed or asked for. Like, how do I balance this? And that's tough, but it's to have that mindset of speculative help, I think could be beneficial.
Yeah, I love that phrase. And I think you're right. Many organizations, unfortunately, this goes back to the philosophy of management. Too many
Mm,
bosses' philosophy is still push my people as hard as they can until they
yeah.
collapse. And when they collapse, I will
Yeah.
demonstrate empathy and say, "Oh, I'm going to give you a week off."
Yes. Yes.
That
Yeah.
that's
So
unconscionable,
yeah.
actually.
We have a policy at Leading with Nice. There's 3 employees plus me, so it's
Hmm.
easier to control. We do not allow half-day vacations
Yeah.
because, and I say that, but because if you need a half day to go to the dentist, just go to the dentist. Like,
Right.
don't give me a 0.5 vacation request. That's not vacation.
Yeah.
Um, like save your vacation days for actual vacation. If you need to
Right.
go shopping for a birthday, go to the mall. And if that half day turns into a whole day, I know you're going to get it later, but they have the freedom to not have to worry about saying, "Oh, do you mind if I take a morning off?" Like, no,
Yeah.
what? Go. But we
Completely.
all work remotely, you know.
Right.
It'd be very creepy if I knew your comings and goings, right? Because that means I'd be like spying on your house. So, okay, last question. Because, dude, man, like as I was reading about you, and even more so after our conversation, I got to know, like, what fueled you into this? Like, what inspired this desire to like speak into this arena and to learn about and really like the reason I do this podcast, for example, because I often talk to people that my mom, Ashley, she's very nice. She's like, well, Matthew, isn't he a competitor? Isn't she a competitor of yours? And I'm like, Mom, trust me, there's plenty of this in the world for all of us to get a lot of work. But I just love talking about it because I want the whole world to get better
Yeah.
at leadership. And I'm a student of leadership. I am not an expert. So what was it? And for me, I think I saw that in different people. So what was it for you that inspired you into this field of study? Like, what drives you? What do you, what's your golden thread?
Yeah, well, it's related to what I've mentioned, that I think our organizations need to become more human-centric. That
Mm,
certainly has been a common thread throughout my career, particularly related in consulting and in executive education. But I would go further and say, um, ultimately, why I do what I do today is to help organizations contribute more joy to the workplace.
mm.
Um, I
Okay,
think,
so where did you get that? Like, where did you experience that, or not, or on the conversely, not experience that you wanted
yeah.
to like pursue that with the passion you have?
Well, I guess I've experienced both,
Mm,
so I know it's possible. The funny
yeah.
thing is, too often my very first career was in the arts, particularly in
Mm,
theater, as a director, mainly. And I noticed that often those experiences were, on the whole, joyful. Not always, of course, but frequently. And generally, in workplaces, I found that you don't encounter those joyful moments nearly as often. And I can't believe that that difference in joyful moments is solely down to, well, Adam, theater, that's the arts. That always happens when you work in creative industries. Because actually, all creative industries are emphasizing certain qualities that bring us joy in the same way that other things bring
mm,
us joy in other elements of work. So so I believe that every organization has the imperative, has the mandate to think about how they can make their workplace a source of great joy, because I think that serves not just employees, but customers, clients, partners, suppliers, regulators, shareholders, you name it. When I find commercial organizations that attempt to maximize joy internally and for their customers, those organizations, funny enough, also do incredibly well financially.
mm,
So
mm.
there's no trade off here.
Very cool. Cool. All right, listen, Adam, where can people find find out more about you and get a copy of your book?
Yeah, well, my website is the easiest way to reach me. Very simple. AdamKingl.com, all one word. My book, Next Generation Leadership, is available globally at all good online and in-person book retailers near you. It's available, I should say, in hardback, ebook, and audiobook.
Cool beans. Who did the audio? Did you read it yourself, or did you hire
I
somebody?
didn't know. No, my publisher they have a fleet
Good. Perfect.
of actors
Yes.
who did it. Yes. So
And it's
funny point there, that the person who
yeah,
read my book is based in Tennessee. So people might listen to that and think, oh, Adam has a slight Southern accent. Not true.
amazing. That's great. That's great. And it's ADAMKINGL.com. Adam, I just wanted, before we go, so listen, if you are thinking of doing a podcast yourself or already doing one, I'm going to list a lot of people that helped me get this one out, but that does not mean you can't do it on your own. But I just have I have a team that I love that helps me get it going. I want to thank them. Naomi Grossman, I mentioned her already. She helps me research and write questions. Jamie Hunter, if you see this online, he's a content manager. He's the guy that's put it all out over social. Carrie Cotton, she is running the business while I'm sitting here having conversations with really cool people. Thank you, Carrie. And Carrie, by the way, on this matter, um, recently I said, here's a project for you and just kind of get it done when you want. She's like, why do you give me such freedom and flexibility over when I do this? And I said, oh, I don't think you'd work for me if I made you do it in certain hours. And she said, you're right. So she is the living proof of what Adam and I talked about. Carrie, I love the work you do. Thank you. Austin Pomeroy is the audio editor. He makes us sound amazing. If you've seen video of this online, that was Jeff Anhorn cutting it together, putting it together. Cindy Craig does all the booking and makes sure guests get into a right time slot and lets me know when to show up. And of course, Allison, my wife, just makes my life amazing, so I can do stuff like this. So I want to thank all those people. But of course, Adam, this podcast would be very boring if it was just me talking about you. So thank you for taking time today. And I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. For more on this, visit leadingwithnice.com, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much.